Hey, by the way, tonight's game, New York wins that outright.
You know he's on top. Million subs, he never gonna flop. Out of Chicago, where the streets don't sleep. Betting on games, making cash real deep. Crystal ball for sports, he knows the lines. He's a sports aficionado, the money he finds. From football to basketball, he's always on point. Predicting winners never disappoints. He's got that hustle, that Chicago vibe. Making moves on the streets, cash on the side. With E, you know it's always a bet. He's the king of the game, never forget.
Hello and welcome to the Etoft21sports show for January 21st. How is everyone doing? My name is Erik. I'm the man behind Etoft21sports. Absolutely loaded episode for you today. My boy Ty from my home state of Michigan, former Michigan State Spartan, is this week's special guest. Him and I are going to look back at the divisional round of the playoffs, share our bets for the AFC and NFC championship game. Plus, Gino will have his horse racing bet of the day from the Pegasus World Cup this weekend over at Gulfstream Park. But before we get into all this, I'd like to say thank you to the sponsor of the show, Prop Hex. If you guys aren't using this, you are missing out. It's a betting exchange, basically a sports book, peer-to-peer betting. Those new to it, download the app, use promo code ETOFT21. If you're watching on YouTube, link to that is in the description below. Now let's shift to see what our boy Gino has cooking for us down at Gulfstream for the Pegasus World Cup.
It's the Pegasus World Cup day on Saturday at Gulfstream Park. I'll be heading over to Gulfstream for the big day, so I figured might as well take a look at the big race here for our play this week. Race number 13 on Saturday, January the 25th, as we dive into the daily racing form past performances, drf.com. So for this type of a big field, there's honestly not that much early speed in here. You go up and down the field. A lot of horses that are middle pack to deep closers, a couple that can sit close and be forwardly placed. I think Locked is the horse to beat, so I'll use him all over the place. He's pretty versatile. He doesn't have to be too far out of it. But the horse who I like in here a little bit is Saudi Crown, the number 2. He's a horse who has always been highly regarded. He was a Grade 1 winner when he won the Pennsylvania Derby. And then this most recent year in 2024, going into the Breeders' Cup, it just was not like everything wasn't going well for him. He was supposed to have another race. He didn't. They were supposed to have a couple extra workouts. His work tab was a little spotty. He just wasn't training very well overall. There were some hiccups along the way going into the Breeders' Cup. Then coming out of the Breeders' Cup, he was just much better. He was fitter. He was in better shape. And you can see he wins the Tenacious. I think he's going to be forwardly placed in here. I think he should be sitting really close throughout. Saudi Crown, he's the number 2. He's 9-2 on the morning line in race 13 on Saturday at Gulfstream Park. That's the Pegasus. Best of luck for everyone playing the races this weekend.
Make sure to give my boy Gino a follow at It's Me, Gino B, on all social media. I am going to be on his podcast later this week, breaking down the games with him, and him and I are live Sunday morning on NFL Betting Blitz. But before I get into all that, which is later in the week, let's focus on today. Let's welcome a first-timer to the show. Really excited to talk to him. He's a fellow Michigander. He's a diehard Michigan State fan, diehard Detroit sports fan like myself. Let's welcome my boy, Ty. Ty, how you doing today, my man?
Erik, I'm doing well. I appreciate you having me on here, man. I'm excited to talk some divisional round and, talk about some bets and talk about AFC, NFC championships coming up.
Before we get into all that, you former Spartan too. Our boy Bobby's go green in the chat room.
Go white, Bobby.
I think they could make some noise. I think this team, ceiling Final Four for this year in college basketball.
Oh man, basketball team, like they're hitting their stride at the right time right now. It was a tough game at home against Illinois the other day, and they found a way to win. And I'm excited to see the growth, especially these young players like Jace Richardson. Like he is playing out of this world. He's playing like a top 25, top 10 draft pick in the next draft. So I'm excited to see what happens as we move forward in the season, like February, March coming up here, and I would love to see Izzo get a second championship. I know that would really be like, good for him, especially as he moves towards the last couple of years of his career. I think this is the team that definitely has they definitely have the depth to do it. They're getting guys coming off the bench, like Frankie Fiddler, he's coming off the bench and putting up numbers, especially when we need them. Like they'll have one guy that is having a down day, the other guy picks him up. So I'm excited to see the progression of this season and see where things go.
I think the best thing that they do is they always like stagger. So there's never like someone not on the court that can't get his. They always have someone to kind of filter the offense through, which is great. I'm excited. Tournament is actually going to be up in Milwaukee this year. I'm actually going to be going up there for a couple days. Pretty excited about that. Our boy Cool Kev, Gino, Ty, Erik, Cool Kev, I appreciate you for tuning in, my man. NAA86, Bills +2. Or are the refs going to give KC the win? What say you, my friend?
So I know we're going to talk about Chiefs Texans in a little bit. The thing that, this kind of goes along with one of my takeaways from that game is the Chiefs really, took advantage of the Texans making mistakes. And, Texans really, outnumbered them in everything. And I'm personally, this is a personal standpoint, I'm ready for a new champion. I'm getting sick of the whole, like, Pat Mahomes, like, T-Swift ordeal. I'm tired of it. I know that a lot of people are pointing out a lot of, there's been some officiating, some questionable calls like that. But I think if the Bills go in and, Josh Allen is that guy, man. Like he is the ability to do stuff on his feet with his arm. He's going to go in there. And I think that, if the Chiefs do slip up or if there is like any room for error, I hope the Bills capitalize on it because I'm definitely pulling for them in that game. So I guess we'll kind of see what happens, but I'm ready for, someone else to take reins in the AFC.
I'm sitting on a Bills future ticket, so I'm doing nothing. I have a couple player props I'll get to later in that game. But on principle alone, if this gets to the Bills plus the 3, I'm definitely going to have to get invested in that. Our boy Cool Kev chimes in. Let someone in the NFC win. RG, what do the Ravens need to win? I was just talking to my boy Bryce from the I Need a Sports Pod about this. Before I get into my 2 cents, what do you say, my friend?
Well, I for one, like, I like watching Lamar play. I think he deserves a championship. He deserves like to be in that position, but fundamentally, the Bills are just great. Like they're a solid team, and that's ultimately what happened in that game, I believe. And if obviously that drop pass by Andrews at the end, didn't help one bit. But if you compare the Bills and the Ravens, if you line them up next to each other, they're pretty even. They both got stud quarterbacks. They're both putting up numbers. I think what they have to do is they just have to, find ways to finish games, find ways to grit out games. And then Lamar's just got to, like, season Lamar is a lot different than playoff Lamar historically. So if he can find 3 good games to put together, in the playoffs, I definitely would be behind, the Ravens or anybody else with the Chiefs at this point, stepping in and taking over.
He needs an X. He's got no X wide receiver. Like, you can't have Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely be the guys you're going to target.
Right.
Like, they need a X wide receiver in order for him to have a chance. You look at the numbers he put up when he had Hollywood Brown, someone that could stretch the field, high point a ball. They were excellent numbers. Now you have Zay Flowers, and I don't mean to be mean. In my eyes, Zay Flowers is too small to be a number 1 wide receiver. Bateman's looking good, but he's not a number 1. They drafted Walker out of UNC, who in my eyes was kind of responsible for making May. I expected a little bit more from him. He can't even get on the field. So in my eyes, they really need to address this in the offseason. Maybe go after a T. Higgins, as my boy Cool Kev is chiming in, Devontae Adams. But they definitely need to give Lamar something, because right now he just doesn't have enough weapons. I know Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry, but he just doesn't have enough weapons. And I think that's kind of what is holding the Ravens back right now.
Question for you, Eric. Do you think that Lamar's window is closing? No. I agree with you there. I agree. I think if they put the right pieces together, like you said, get that X factor in there, that they can put up numbers just as much as KC and Buffalo next year.
Jaden Daniels, you know what? We look great. And I will say this, a rookie to go in there and do what he did was amazing.
Yeah, commendable.
Hey, what do y'all think about the Notre Dame game?
Well, I was definitely surprised at how close it ended up being. Obviously, they ended up hitting the spread, so that was good. But I think that Ohio State has, you can have a conversation. They got like 10 plus guys on their team that are NFL ready. They got a core of wide receivers that are NFL wide receivers. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to compete against that. And I think that Marcus Freeman has Notre Dame going in the right direction, though. I think he's, a great coach, and he obviously has like a personable relationship with his players, and, what he's developed at Notre Dame and in comparison to what they've seen in the past with like, Brian Kelly, coaches like that. I think that that program is 100% heading in the right direction, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them in the playoff again next year.
Lamar has at least 2 more seasons before the salary cap dismantles the team. Hit $100,000 parlay on it. Made some good stuff, man. Good stuff. Yeah, it's been a good year this year on the show. What are we, like 63-41, I believe. I'll bring the record up in a little bit when we get to it, but it's been a good year of betting. Always glad to see you guys making some money on some bets. But let's get to the takeaways. We're going to look back. We're kind of going to go game by game. Let's start with the Texans-Chiefs game. What do you think about that game? What was your big takeaway from that game?
My big takeaway from that game is Andy Reid style football. Very, very few mistakes, and they capitalized on the couple mistakes that Houston made. Those missed field goals and some of those situations, some of those drives where they were close to putting the ball in the end zone and they ended up having to settle for 3. I think Houston came in and they had a good game plan, but ultimately it was, like I said, Andy Reid style football, like very fundamentally sound. They didn't make a whole lot of mistakes, and the cliche response here is we could talk about, some of those questionable calls, especially that unnecessary roughness call where the 2 defenders on Houston hit each other and, the flag comes up in the air. I think it's to the point where, that kind of style of, I'm not gonna dismiss Pat Mahomes because he's a great quarterback. He's a great player. But that little whoop-de-doo he did out of bounds, like flopping around, like that's kind of like, I feel like toxic for the QB culture as a whole. Cause like you're expecting a flag every time. You're not putting, the extra whatever in to make a play. You're expecting a flag to get bailed out. So I'm not going to sit here and, say that's the reason, but that definitely had a little bit to do with it, at least.
My big takeaway from that game is Texans defense is legit. They need to address the offensive line in the draft with how deep the offensive line talent is in the draft. This season, they're going to be able to get a starter, I feel, at the 25th pick. And then they do have some cap space. It is very limited, though. In the free agent market, they need to get a wide receiver 2 to go along with Nico Collins. It was so evident their lack of playmakers in that game against the Chiefs. Tank Dell is going to be out for all of next season with that ACL injury. I don't think they're going to bring Diggs back coming off the injury. And even if they do, he's not going to be the same. when we are looking at the free agent market. You have Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper is going to be a huge discount because of the season, because of the drops. You're going to be able to get him at a discount. Or my boy, who from Ole Miss, who has had a history of bad quarterbacks, when we saw when he got Jameis Winston, he was able to put up numbers. Elijah Moore, great route runner. I think he would be great again with Nico Collins working underneath. I think the Texans, and I know everyone's going to be talking about the Bears because they did bring in Ben Johnson as someone they want to invest in with futures. I think the Texans, I think they're going to be sneaky depending what they do in the draft if they're able to solve their offensive line and they're able to get a second wide receiver. So
yeah, I like the direction, that they like. If you look back at the beginning of the season compared to, last weekend, like they had a series of their season where I didn't expect them to even be in the playoffs. And CJ Stroud, just phenomenal athlete, phenomenal QB. And I think, like you were saying, if they bring in some more pieces that, we can have that conversation, next season or even sooner. Like,
now let's shift our attention over to the Eagles and Rams. What do you think about that game, my friend?
Ultimately, Hurts, you can look at Hurts, and obviously he's got the potential to be great, but his inconsistency is what's holding him back right now. But he's got some absolute, he's got some dogs on his team. He's got some great targets with AJ Brown and Goddard and Devontae Smith and obviously Saquon. I think that the Eagles without Saquon are a completely different team. He's had the ability to, break free and, bring those home run balls home. And I think that the Eagles took advantage of those late turnovers by the Rams, and the Rams definitely came in with a plan, and they made it interesting towards the end, with them going down the field and Nakua making that really good over the shoulder catch. I think that, ultimately what happened was the turnovers, and the Eagles took advantage of it late, and they ended up sneaking away with that one. But once we shift over to talking about the NFC Championship, then we can talk more about what I think is going to happen with the Commanders. But the Rams, man, like with Stafford, like he's obviously a former Lion, and I'm not one of those guys that like hates on Stafford too much. I respect him, and I respect his time that he had in Detroit, but he's a well-seasoned quarterback, and he knows how to win games. And the Eagles just, they overpowered him with, Saquon, AJ, Goddard, all those guys. So
Kelly and Cooper a thing now? That was hilarious. People were speculating that's because Cooper Kupp was not getting the balls because him and Kelly are having a little bit of a fling. My big takeaway from the Eagles game, Eagles should have won that game by 20+. A.J. Brown dropped 40-yard touchdown pass. 2 drives where sacks took them out of field goal range. Sirianni at the end of the half, some of the worst time management skills you will see. Instead, Hurts took that sack. Instead of taking the timeout there, trying to run it out where they could get into field goal range, he just let the clock run down so they could run a Hail Mary instead of calling the timeout. Absolutely made zero sense. Elliott missing not 1, but 2 PATs. The Eagles not being able to sneak the ball in from the 1-yard line because of Lane Johnson false start. They literally should have blown that game out. They were up by 13 with 2 minutes left, and all that stuff had happened. So they left so many points off of the board. That's what stood out to me. And I love Matt Stafford. I think he should have his number retired at Ford Field. I think he did a lot for the franchise. He needs to retire. When we look at what Jimmy G did that last game of the season, the Rams offense looked better with Jimmy G than it did with Matt Stafford. I'm sorry. I'm a huge Matt Stafford guy. But when we just look at the numbers and the splits, look better with Jimmy G. I think Stafford needs to hang it up, and they need to go in a different direction accordingly.
Yeah, he got his ring. So, if he hung it up right now, that's a phenomenal career if you look at it. Putting up numbers all those years he did in Detroit, and then obviously going to LA and making an impact right away. like I said, I'm not a big. There's a lot of people that say like, oh, screw Stafford because of all that situation with the fans, making comments toward their kids, stuff like that. But I respect him. I think he's a good guy, and I want nothing for the best for him. But there was that, the ending of that game is just wild. Like, you look at it,
it was just a crazy game. Next, let's go to Baltimore and Buffalo. What say you about that game, my friend?
Well, we kind of already touched base on this a little bit, but I think what it boils down to is Lamar is doing everything with what he can, but he needs more pieces. He needs more pieces, like those X factors added to his rotation, and he can only do so much. Obviously, that Mark Andrews drop at the end was detrimental to the score of the game. But if you look at the first 3 quarters leading up to all that, the guy's scrambling. He's doing everything he can, but he needs more targets. He needs more people he can rely on because he can't do everything himself. And Josh Allen, just a great quarterback. He did what he was supposed to do, and the Bills had that. They're trying to get past that point, and it was a wild atmosphere in Buffalo, especially with the weather in Buffalo and Philly. But Lamar just needs more people. He needs more pieces for them to get past that point.
Shout out. I can't bring up the Instagram comments. Shout out to my girl, Betting in Heels. If you're not following her, give her a follow. She knows her stuff. Hilarious. One of the funniest people in the world, especially when she gets fired up and starts talking trash about people. Absolutely great follow. Make sure to give her a follow. What is up, my girl, Lady D? My takeaway about that game, I know Andrews is getting all the blame. That fumble, the drop. But
he's getting the Justin Tucker treatment in Baltimore right now.
But I look at the game like this. This is just me taking a step back. If the Ravens in the third quarter didn't go for 2, they just needed the PAT to tie the game with how the game played out. And on top of that, the Bills had 2 timeouts with 1:33 left. You're telling me Josh Allen isn't going to drive down the field with how they're moving the ball? You know what I mean? So I get it, but I don't think necessarily that is why they lost. Lamar had some awful turnovers. They still would have had time on the clock for the Bills to drive down. Now, if you want to argue that they could have won in overtime or there would be more time left on the clock where the Ravens could have answered the Bills, I get it. I understand that. But to say it's just on Andrews, there's still time left on the clock. Allen was going to be able to drive him down the field.
Yeah, he just happened to be the last piece of that whole puzzle that led up to that point, and that's unfortunate. But that's just what happened, and he's gonna just take his licks. He's obviously taking his licks from Baltimore fans and people all over. But I'm not gonna sit here and say like he's it's just unfortunate, but that's just how the game played out. So.
Interesting though, he does have 1 year left and they can get out of his contract to fill up some cap space. So if they do that, everyone is going to talk about because he dropped the ball. Now let's get to our poverty franchise as it was planned.
Erik, at this point, I like you introduced me in the beginning. I've been a Lions fan my whole life, and it feels like a toxic relationship at this point. You keep going back and expecting things to change, and for us to obviously they've changed for the better the last couple of years, but I want that Super Bowl, man. I want to at least get there and see what they can do. But talk about miscues. 5 turnovers. You're not gonna beat a team like a high scoring offense, high powered offense like Washington when you turn the ball over 5 times. It's just simply not going to happen. Washington has too many, they got too many key guys for Daniels to throw the ball to. And why we were having Jameson Williams throw the ball at that point in the game, it's beyond me. But it's just unfortunate how it all happened. And I definitely definitely a complete flip side of what I expected going into that game. I thought that they were going to have the guys ready, and our defense just looked, they couldn't stop a nosebleed. So,
where do I start with this game? I look at it like this. The Lions pulled the Ravens from last year. Ravens, dominant run game last year against the Kansas City Chiefs who couldn't stop the run. Why didn't because last year, we just look at the game last year, excuse me. Ravens, top 5 rushing attack. Chiefs, bottom 4 defensive against the rush. In that game, the Ravens only had 16 rushing attempts last year. I'm referring to the AFC Championship game. On Saturday night, the Lions were averaging 8.7 yards a rushing attempt, and they only had 23 rushing attempts. Now, look, I know a lot of that is Graham's script. They got behind. They had to throw the ball. In the first quarter, they were averaging 7.1 yards per attempt, 3rd and 1 from the Commanders' 19. They had Goff drop back, and he fumbled the ball. And right then I texted my brother. I'm like, we're going to lose this game. I don't understand why Johnson just didn't run the ball, control the clock. I think they win the game that way. With how bad their defense was, that keeps the Lions. It's not about keeping the Commanders' offense off the field. It's about keeping the Lions' defense off the field. By doing that, controlling the clock, that's all they had to do. The game plan from Johnson did not make sense to me at all. And I feel like once they got behind, a little bit of panic kind of set in. Also, you're a Lions fan. There's a lot of Hayden Hooker talk. What does it say about Hayden Hooker that Teddy Bridgewater, who had been coaching high school football in Florida all year, comes in, and during that game, he was QB2 and got run, and Hayden Hooker was the emergency quarterback? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And it's going to be interesting. Like, I'm not an Aaron Glenn guy. I rumor has it like he's going to get signed by the Jets to be their coach. I think moving on from him is good defensively. Personally, I would have fired him after the debacle in the NFC Championship game where they blew that 17-point lead. I thought he should have got fired after that game. And I think Johnson, he was great, but in my eyes, sometimes he gets too gimmicky. There's too much, why are we having a play where toss it to Montgomery, he does a shovel pass to St. Brown? Why is Jameson Williams down by 10, biggest drive of the season,
throwing the ball?
Like, I feel sometimes he gets too fancy. Now, are they going to promote within? I don't know. Like, that's the rumor. Tanner, I'm spacing his last name. There's rumors that that's going to be the guy they bring in to take over for Johnson as the OC. I'm fine with that. Maybe they need to bring in somebody else. But I definitely think like some new voices need to be heard, because it's the second year in a row where they had a playoff. They made the playoffs, and in a critical situation, they weren't able to win the game. So I think changes need to be made. So I think losing those guys, some people may think it's a bad thing. I think long term, probably some voices need to be changed.
Yeah, I think long term too is I'm a big Brad Holmes fan. I think that he's a integral part of why the Lions have had the recent success, and I think that he's gonna find the right guys to take over their jobs. And like you said, I think some new faces and some new just management of how things have, especially with this last game as an example. I think that'll be good, from a personal standpoint, to see the direction that takes the team for next year. Because, man, I don't know about you, but I want to at least get to that Super Bowl sometime in my life, and this was so close. So, I mean, not as close here, but
if they make it, they make it. If they don't, they don't. You know what I mean? That's honestly where I am now. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel last year was the year, in all honesty. Mm-hmm. I feel last year, if they would have got there, I feel they would have beat the Chiefs. This year, I felt there was a little too much hype around them. They're one of the most bet teams to make it. Now let's shift our attention to Ben Johnson.
Ben Johnson.
I'm out in Chicago. You would think that they won the Super Bowl. I'm going to tell you right now, the Bears are going to be the most bet team to make the playoffs, over under, win the Super Bowl, Caleb Williams MVP. There's going to be so many bets on this team. My 2 cents is this. We don't know if Ben Johnson can manage the room. We literally have no idea if he can manage the room. There's been a laundry list of coordinators that have been excellent coordinators that when they got this job to be the head coach, they just couldn't do it. It was just too much for them to manage the whole room. Can Johnson do it? Maybe. Can he not? I don't know. So for me, it's too early to get too hyped, and the Bears got so many holes. Even if this does turn out to be something, I think it's like a year away.
Right. And if you look at it, there's so many weapons on the Lions offense, and that attributes a lot to, the reason that they're such a high-powered, high-scoring team. You got Waymo, and you got St. Brown, and you got, all these guys that even Tim Patrick really stepped up this year when we needed him to. He had his couple bad games or whatever, but if you look at the Bears, where they're at right now in their roster in comparison to the Lions, like the two offenses, obviously you got Caleb, big money guy that came in, this past season, rookie, but I don't know. I don't know if Ben can. We haven't seen that part of Ben. We haven't seen if he can manage the whole room. We've seen what he can do with the stud players that the Lions have had, but it'll be interesting to see like kind of the progression in what direction, that Chicago team goes. Because I just, the last couple of changes that have happened in Chicago, everybody was behind field. The Bears are so back, and then that ended up not working out. Same thing with Williams this last year. And, the Bears were objectively terrible. So,
and I don't know, like Williams likes to press it downfield. Is he going to be able to take the underneath stuff? Williams is legit. He was great.
Yeah, no, he's great.
Is he going to be able to fit the system? The whole Ben Johnson system. It's run the ball, have a good offensive line, control the clock, work the middle of the field with a lot of play action and a lot of men in motion so the quarterback can disciple it. A lot of underneath stuff. Williams able to do that? Maybe. I don't know. He likes to run the ball. He likes to be active. He likes to push it down the field. Goff's playing style fit the Johnson offense to a T.
Mm-hmm.
Williams is 10 times the athlete, 10 times the arm streak than Jared Goff. Is Johnson going to tail stuff around, which he probably will because he's a smart guy, to what Williams needs to what Williams can do. Obviously, need to improve that offensive line. They need to get and DeAndre Swift, fantasy football owners, definitely want to look to get him. This is the comment. What didn't JMO get arrested for this season? Let's see. Gambling. He got suspended, not arrested. There was a gun when he got pulled over. Is there anything else he got arrested?
He didn't get he got cleared up for that.
He got cleared up for that?
It's not. No, I don't know what they followed up with it before, but they're trying to look into the fact because his brother was in the vehicle with him and had a concealed license. So he needs to. That dude has the potential to be the best, and I just hope that he stays on the straight and narrow because we could really use him for an entire season, and we haven't had that luxury yet.
Hopefully he can get it together. Let's shift our attention over to some betting, but before we get into all that, we need to look back at how we did last week. Nice 4-2 week last week, bringing the record for the show to 63, 43, and 1. O'Kane hit the Commanders plus 9.5. His 6-point teaser with the Bills plus 7 in the Eagles pick. However, he lost his Pacheco or Mixon first-time touchdown bet. Old Uncle Rico hit Dalton Schultz over 34.5 yards receiving, and Austin Eckler over 22.5 yards receiving, but lost the Texans plus 5.5 for the first half. And shout out to my guy, the Texans kicker, for missing that field goal. That's what cost me that bet. I hate losing bets because of field goal kickers, and I lost 2 last weekend, but that's last weekend. This is this weekend. Let's jump right into it. Your first bet, my friend.
Okay, so I like Terry McLaurin. 66.9. He's averaging receiving yards per game this year. I like him going 70 plus. I think that his relationship with Daniels, like he has ability to hit that big play. He might hit that in 2 plays. He had the ability to do that against Detroit the other day. So I like McLaurin 70 plus.
Sports Facts chimes in. Eagles are banged up. I like this one a lot. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the how they attack this Eagles defense. Fangio is a stud. I think Scary Carey is in line for a good game. My first bet is I'm going to Kansas City and Buffalo. Give me Dalton Kincaid over 33.5 receiving yards. KC struggles against tight ends. They've allowed the most yards per game to opposing tight ends, 70.8 yards per game. The last 10 games, 9 out of the 10 tight ends that have faced the Chiefs have surpassed this total, with the only one not being Jordan Akins of the Browns that finished with 30 yards. Kincaid didn't play well against the Chiefs. Earlier this year in the game against the Chiefs, Kincaid did not play because of the injury. Dalton Knox did have 40 yards. When we look at Kincaid's playoff performance last year against the Chiefs, 4 receptions, 45 yards in the divisional round. Also, Kincaid ranks second in targets, third in receptions, and third in receiving yards for the entire season. Second in targets, reception, and yards for the playoffs. The Chiefs are likely to focus on limiting Cook and Shakir. I think this is going to open up stuff for Dalton Kincaid. We were on Dalton Schultz last week, the over 34.5. Chiefs just can't cover the middle of the field, and they're awful covering the tight ends. So look, give me Dalton Kincaid over 33.5 receiving yards. Next bet, my friend.
All right, I'm gonna stay in Philadelphia, Washington, and I'm taking the over in this game. I think that it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think it's going to be a shootout. Kind of already touched base on McLaurin, being able to hit that big play, but I think there's going to be big plays from both sides. I think Saquon's going to definitely bust a home run ball out. I think that it's gonna be a lot closer than what Eagles fans think too. We'll talk about that in a bit when we talk about the predictions, but I think I'm definitely taking the over in this game. I feel confident with that. I think it might even surpass that by quite a bit too. I like both these offenses. Obviously, Hurts is at his inconsistencies, but he's got his weapons. Daniels is a weapon in himself, and then he also has his guys. I'm liking the over big time.
Yeah, I think this game could drift out too. My next bet, same game, tight end frenzy for me this weekend. Give me Travis Kelce over 68.5 yards receiving. Had 7 receptions for $117 last week. Has exceeded this total in 4 of his last 5 games against the Bills, averaging 5.8 receptions, 74 yards per game in that time span. Now, this is the mind-blowing stat. Kelce, in his career, 23 playoff games. He has gone over 68.5 yards in 17 of them. Absolutely mind-blowing. The last playoff game that Kelce did not go over this total was the Super Bowl against the 49ers in 2020. He has gone over this total in 14 consecutive playoff games. Isaiah Likely recorded 4 receptions for 75 yards last week against the Bills. The Bills ranked top 12 this season, 4 receptions allowed to the tight end position. Buffalo runs zone coverage, 9th highest rate in the league. This gives Kelce opportunities just to sit down, in the exploited gaps on defense. When we look at who is going to be lined up against them, Johnson, PFF grade 56.8. Bernard, PFF coverage grade of 37.4. Matt Milano, who's hurt, who may not play, who didn't play the last snaps of the game against the Ravens, coverage game 50.3. Just all strong matchups for anyone that's going to be guarding him. Look, if it's working, I'm going to keep doing it. Give me Travis Kelce over 68.5 yards receiving. You have a Travis Kelce bet too, my friend.
I do. I'm liking the Kelce anytime TD. I think he's going to get targeted a lot. You just talked about his, historical playoff performances over the years, but I think he's going to get a lot of touches. I think that, Mahomes and him have that great quarterback tight end connection. Obviously we've talked about KC and the whole Taylor Swift media frenzy that's been intertwined in that whole thing. But long story short, people want to see Kelce get targeted too. So I think that's going to play into that whole factor. And I'm liking a Kelce anytime TD.
I like that one too. I think that he's going to just balloon out this weekend. It's just a great matchup, especially the Bills. They just can't cover, and their defense is so old. I want to punch Kelce. I'm sure I'm not the biggest Kelce fan. Before I get to my last bet, do you remember the VH1? Travis Kelce had a dating show on that. He had a dating show on VH1, which was hilarious. My next bet and last bet, give me A.J. Brown over 59.5 yards receiving. Maybe I'm falling into it here with Jalen Hurts. I got to do it. When we look at the Commanders' defense, 20th DVOA against the pass, 22nd DVOA defending wide receiver ones. PFF coverage grades them 29th in the league. He's going to get Lattimore. PFF graded 61.1, ranked 75 out of 118 DBs. Or Saran still, 67.7 PFF grade, ranked 47 out of 118. Both average or below average defenders based on their PFF grades. A.J. Brown, when we look at the Commanders' defense, the Commanders use a mix of zone and man coverage. Third best wide receiver against man coverage, 11th best wide receiver against zone coverage per PFF. When you look at the Commanders this season, he averaged 6.5 receptions, 81 yards per game, exceeded 59.5 yards in both matchups. When we look at his production historically against the Dan Quinn defense, 6 games, averaging 82 yards per game, exceeding this total in every game. The last 4 games of the regular season, 3 of the 4 wide receivers ones that the Commanders played went over the 59.5 yards. The only exception, the law firm MVS finished with 50 yards, and that is when Spencer Rattler was his quarterback. Opposing wide receiver ones averaged 91.25 yards during that stretch. Playoffs this year, wide receiver ones have gone over 59.5 yards in both games. Mike Evans, 7 for 93. Last week, St. Brown, 8 for 137. Give me A.J. Brown over 59.5 yards receiving. This Commanders defense is awful. And I think this is kind of getting lost in everything with how bad this Commanders defense is. Ty, before I let you go, let's just give our prediction for each game. You can throw out the score too. First game, Commanders Eagles. What's your score prediction, my friend?
I think it's going to be a high scoring game, but I think the Eagles at home are they're going to overpower them. And it's Eagles. I got Eagles over the Commanders in that one. And then I've got Buffalo beating KC.
Ooh. All right.
I'm being optimistic a little bit there.
So I have Eagles. big. I think Eagles blow them out. I think this is like I'm going to say like 35-10 type game. I think it's going to be 35-17. I don't think that the Commanders are going to stop the Eagles at all. Saquon Barkley's over-under for rushing is 120 yards.
That's
over-under for rushing is 120.
That's an insane stat.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to get stops. I think the Eagles are just going to turn this into, I don't want to say a track meet, but because the Commanders aren't going to be able to stop anything, I think they're going to run away with it. This Bills game, I think it just comes down to whoever has the ball last. I think to me, this is like a 27-24, 26-25 type game. Some funky number like that with a last-second field goal. Either wins it by 3 or wins it by 2 for the other team. Personally speaking, I have the Eagles 15-1 and the Bills 9-1. So ideally, in a perfect world, that's what the future I want. I want Bills and Eagles. That way I don't have to bet the game. I can just do some props, whatever. But, hoping for 2 good games. Ty, I would like to thank you for coming on, talking a little football and whatnot. Look forward to working with you some more in the future. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you on social media, my friend?
Yeah, so my X handle is right there on the screen, and then that's my Instagram handle as well. I'd love to connect with you guys on X or Instagram, whatever works for you. Erik, it's my pleasure, my man. Had a good time talking ball and some bets, and look forward to coming on again and talking some more, and look forward to following up with MSU basketball this year and just seeing where things go with that too. So
I look forward to it, man. It's always funny, like how this social media stuff, like kind of happens. Like last year, Bryce from 98 Sports Pod just randomly reached out to him, never talked to him before about a thing about in the NBA. You reached out to me because I was a dickhead and didn't follow you back after you followed me on social media. And now you're here on the show. So I appreciate you coming on, man. We're going to be back here next week with the Bills' #1 fan, my boy David, a.k.a. Better DP21. Make sure to check that out. Ty, I'd like to thank you for coming on, and we'll talk soon, my friend.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, Erik. Have a good one, my man.